Hello, my name is Simon Smith, and here is my book, Fake Aliens and the Phony Nuke World Order, that was published on Amazon in July of this year, 2018. I just want to say a little bit about the book. There are several ideas involved with fake aliens and the phony nuke world order. The first is that all purported aliens are either CIA and related intelligence agencies creations, and the machinations of catchpennies who wish to jump on the aliens and ET's money spinning agenda. The second part of the book deals with the new idea, and a very controversial idea, that nuclear weapons are a gigantic hoax. Now, this is a very difficult thing to swallow when you first hear it, and people can be forgiven for thinking it's a load of nonsense. I would ask people to bear with me on this. I bring the two together and I reveal it in what can be said is the main thesis of the book, which I will read out now. Flying saucers are of terrestrial origin, along with the uses they may have been put to. They have been advertised around supposed nuclear installations. In doing so, the powers that be have cleverly affirmed the reality of nukes amongst ufologists and others. This, I assert, is a gigantic psyop and may be best understood in the context of other nuke world order machinations. Now, to say nuclear weapons is a hoax is very reminiscent of a similar argument involving NASA's fake moon landings, because the objection always comes to the fore. If America faked the moon landings or fake nuclear weapons, Russia would be the first to put their hand up and say this is all baloney, this is not true. So, in order to develop the theme in the later part of the book, I examine the relationship between the Soviet Union and the Western powers, including the USA, and I try and make a case that they're all playing for the same team, basically, that their overlords, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the bankers govern them as well, and it's all a big charade. Now, perhaps I can just show on camera the breakdown of the book. So here we are. Chapter 1, dealing with the German origins of flying saucer technology, as it were. Then chapter 2, Little Green Men, deals with purported aliens, and I examine some of the most famous cases, and believe that those who believe in the ET story are somewhat lacking. Quite a few people who actually believe in the ET origins, such as Nick Redfern with Roswell, have made good cases for them being the human test subjects. So the 1940s and 50s, that's another chapter. So I examine abductions, mutilations and crop circles and find that there are human explanations for those. Other disinformation relating to aliens, supposed aliens. Then in part 2 of the book, I look at, first of all, the purported history, and I've called that from Berlin to Manhattan to Nagasaki. Within the nuke narrative, Einstein has a disproportionate influence on the public perception of the development of the so-called atom bomb. I look at the various aspects of that, for example, the fashioning of scientific perception by popular culture, examining Einstein a little bit and the supposed physics of the atom bomb. And there's a very good video of Galen Windsor online showing the effects of radioactivity, and they've often been very exaggerated. Escalation and broken arrows, UFOs and nukes. Now, I'll cover Robert Hastings a little bit. I've got a high regard for him. I believe he's a genuine researcher. He just comes to the wrong conclusions. Here we go. So all this, by the way, you can see it much more clearer than me floating the book in the air in front of a webcam. Can be seen on Amazon.com and .co.uk, along with a description of my own background and my qualifications for writing this book. So I look at the atomic propulsion and atomic energy commission. I think there's a case that atomic propulsion has been developed by the AEC under the cover of actually developing atomic weapons. So that gives them the security blanket, and also it allows them to weave a narrative about visiting aliens around the atomic energy facilities, and gives this idea that they're visiting there when in fact they might actually be originating from there. The Cuban Missile Crisis, I look at that and discuss that. The early 20th century. Now, I'm trying to build a case here that there's an overarching, for want of a better word, conspiracy that sort of links the governments of West and East in a way that is not always apparent. So we look at a little bit a background, the World War I, the Bolshevik Revolution, the financing of Hitler. Various Western bankers were involved with that, often being fronts for Rothschild banks. Look at the retrieval of technology, including the possibility of an amnesty for leaders in the Third Reich in exchange for flying saucer technology. The First Cold War. This, I think, I try and answer the notion that why doesn't Russia say something about things. I look at the spying charade, why the FBI was unable to get to grips with many of the supposed communist spies, and look at the British case of the so-called Cambridge Five, who seemed to evade the net and served a purpose in sort of helping to create the idea that, amongst other things, nuclear information had been given to the Russians. So it's a bit of theatrical production, and it's sort of, in a way, it sort of underlines the Cuban Missile Crisis well in that regard. Back in the USSR, I'll look briefly at Putin, Vladimir Putin, amongst other things, and how he took over. Now, it's very common to believe that Vladimir Putin is some sort of balance to the evil in the West, and he's some sort of redeemer that we can look to. Many of us watch Russia Today RT because we believe it's better than rubbish such as the Cartoon News Network or the BBC, for example. Having said that, if one examines the politics of Russia and the West, we find that they agree on many things that revisionists and truth seekers find puzzling, such as nuclear weapons, for example, and the space program, and things regarding World War II and revisionist topics that the West and the East seem to agree on. In the news, we see them supposedly disagreeing, and I submit this is just public theatre, in the same way that in the West there's not a cigarette paper you can get between the policies of the Conservative and Labour Party, or one supposes between the Democrats and the Republicans. It's all there for public theatre and propaganda. And just going back in the book, this twin narrative is a popular theme in misleading the public, particularly going back to the UFO position. You can believe that UFOs are real and therefore must be piloted by aliens, or they are swamp gas or balloons. There's no middle path to believe that they exist, are of terrestrial origin, and ETs don't come into the equation. So the media is able to always squeeze a narrative that excludes an often middle interpretation. So that's the book. Oh yeah, this is part 4, which I don't believe I've described. So where are we? Looking down the bottomless pit, that's a brief look at some of the evil people who run the world. I look at the secret space program, Richard Dolan and other ufologists. I'm not too sure that Richard Dolan is a legitimate researcher. He hobnobs with astronaut Edgar Mitchell, and Edgar Mitchell has sort of said the opposite of what I believe. Edgar Mitchell, I mentioned right at the start of the book how Edgar Mitchell has said that he believes aliens have prevented humans from going into nuclear war. So look at false flag attack possibilities, suppression of exotic technology, obviously the electrogravitic technology that I believe the Germans developed towards the end of the Second World War, and suppression of nuclear energy alternatives. I think the liquid salt reactors are make for very interesting reading, and of course many will have seen the notion of preservation of the petrodollar as a determinant of America's onslaught onto the Eurasian continent. Okay, so that's the book. Thanks for watching this, and I'm not used to making this type of video, so forgive my clumsiness. I'll be willing to answer any questions that people may have if they wish to leave them underneath the video, and I'll put links as well. Thanks very much for watching.